Hello and welcome to Agency Office Hours, live Q&A to help you grow your agency this year and beyond. I'm Karl Sakas, agency consultant, and this is Agency Office Hours for February 2022. I'll be answering questions live from agency owners and leaders all over the world. Here's a preview of the questions we'll be answering today. First, Hensley in Texas has a question about pricing models, specifically how to find the pricing sweet spot. Angela in North Carolina has a question about 4-day work weeks. How are agencies making 4-day work weeks work these days? We have tips from today's sponsor, HighLevel, sharing about client retention. Chase from the HighLevel team and I will be talking about how to boost client retention in your agency. So thanks to Chase for being here and HighLevel as today's sponsor. Then Ian in New Jersey has a question about whether cold calling works these days. You might be surprised by the answer. And finally, Patrick in Florida has a question about how fast agencies might grow. What is a normal growth rate? What is a fast growth rate? And how do you find the right growth rate for you and your agency? If I mentioned your question, you'll be coming up live shortly for Q&A. If you had submitted a question for today, but I did not mention your name, you won't be on the list today, but feel free to submit your question for a future event. We are here every second Tuesday in this time slot, and of course, the recording going out online afterwards. As a reminder, if you're one of the people asking a question today, don't share anything out loud that you don't want to become public. Nothing that's covered under an NDA, please. All right, and if you're watching live, you'll get the recording within 24 hours. And if you're watching the recording already, well, you've got it immediately. All right, well, coming up first is Hensley. Hensley, if you want to come on video, unmute yourself. Welcome to Agency Office Hours.
Thank you. And kind of serendipitously, Chase, I was literally emailing someone from your team 30 minutes ago. So this is
wow,
the most random. Yeah.
That's awesome.
we one of our clients, we worked in implementing HighLevel with them, and we're inquiring about implementing it with our own agency. So great feedback and happy to put a face to the name. Yeah, so a little bit of background on me and what we do. So I had no intent of starting an agency at all, which is probably why I'm dealing with the issue I'm dealing with.
You're not alone in that, by the way, as an accidental agency owner.
Yeah. So my background is in fitness franchising, which was, as we know, hugely impacted during COVID. And so I was formerly overseeing sales for 5,000 studio locations, and looked out at our industry and thought, they are not the people that need my help. The other, nascent franchisors and individual studio owners is who needs my help. Cut to, it's been 12 months and we now have worked with about 150 studios. Our largest client is 400 franchises. Our smallest client doesn't yet have a location yet. So
okay.
We're, in candidness, the biggest learning curve has been this was meant to be a solo mission. So having a payroll and figuring out what my pricing needed to be to support myself as a consultant is different than what my pricing now is with a team of 10. So I would love any intel on how to format pricing based on deliverables, based on phone calls and email correspondence, and kind of any point in the right direction you can give me there.
Absolutely. So to summarize, ultimately your question is this: how do we find the pricing sweet spot? How do we find the right pricing for the agency now and for the future?
Yeah. And I guess taking it a step further is I feel like every single new client inquiry has to come to me, and I am pricing is, and so if there was some sort of structure I could follow and then delegate to a member of my team to say, all right, if they fit this criteria, it might be this pricing, but I'm literally, no one has gotten the same price yet because I'm just waiting for the other piece I should say is we don't get pushback on price, which having spent years in sales indicates that I'm probably charging too low. But I don't want to make this, out of touch for the people that need it. So yes, how do I find my pricing sweet spot?
Well, there are a number of things going on. First, I would think about what is the right pricing model for you. So there are three agency pricing models: milestone or deliverable based, where people pay a certain price and they get either certain project deliverables or deliverables in an ongoing marketing retainer. It's one price, you get certain things, that's it. That's milestone or deliverable based pricing. The second pricing model is time and materials, or hourly, where you're charging an hourly rate or maybe multiple rates, right? You might have a higher hourly rate than a mid-level team member or a more junior team member, things like that. And you basically just total up the hours, multiply it by the relevant rate or rates, and that's what clients pay. And the third model is value-based pricing, where you're charging effectively a commission or a royalty or something that's tying the price to the results. So for instance, with your clients, it could be something related to a payment per lead or payment per opportunity closed or something. There are different ways to do that. But does that make sense in terms of pricing model options in general?
Yeah, and I would say we use all three of those now.
Got it. And so one of the things to consider would be, what is your default, and then what is the alternate, or what is an alternate option? For instance, there's a lot of naysaying about time and materials, but if you're doing something for the very first time and it's totally open-ended, time and materials probably make sense, at least in the beginning. Over time, as you get a better idea of what your internal processes are and so on, milestone can make sense. And once you are fully confident about the results you can get and the effort it takes to get those results, doing something value-based, especially when it is, say, lead gen oriented, or you're helping people grow in a certain way and your effort is tied to that result, then doing something value-based can make sense. So something to consider, and you don't have to decide this right now, but what is your default? What is the right default model? Something to consider. So if in your sales conversations, people say yes, all the time, or almost all the time, you're right. You probably want to raise your prices. In general, as a benchmark, I would consider this. Like what's a good proposal win rate? If you shoot for a proposal win rate of 50 to 70%, that is 50 to 70% of the proposals that go out, client says yes and they move forward, that's probably an indicator of your pricing sweet spot. If it's well below 50%, you're probably over proposing. You're proposing to people that can't afford your help, aren't ready for your help. There may be some other things. And my colleague Kate can share my article about Crux, which is my alternative to the BANT pricing and qualification methodology. But ultimately, if it's well below 50%, you're probably over proposing. On the other hand, if it's 90 or 100%, you're probably underpriced. So goal is to keep raising the prices until the win rate goes down somewhat. The key thing, though, is that ideally the win rate is, in the end, you're bringing in more money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, to your question about what to do about screening people initially, there are 6 agency roles. And as you grow, and this is part of your transition from getting started a year ago, now you've got 10 people, you're probably going to step back from some of these roles over time. For instance, there's account management, keep the clients happy and typically sell them more work. Project management, get the work done smoothly and efficiently. Your subject matter experts, depending on services, could be design, development, analysis, writing, and so on, primarily doing their craft all day long. You also have strategists, which is primarily focused on how to maximize the client's budget ROI based on the budget they have. What should you do to maximize the budget? And then you've also got biz dev, marketing, sales, and partnerships, and finally support, which is operations and leadership. So, you had mentioned that, it sounds like you don't want to be on every single sales communication. you've been there, you've done that. You can do it if needed, but you'd rather not be on every single one. My suggestion would be to start by delegating the SDR type work, the sales development representative, the kind of entry level qualifying of people. So for instance, if someone reaches out and they said, hey, we have a franchise of fitness studios, we see that, you do this, maybe you could help, could we get on a call? No, never get on a call. Or I mean, yes, you may eventually get on a call, but not just because someone requests it. And this even is true if it's someone's a referral, right? You mentioned like maybe you're working with, say, one region or like a particular franchisee who has a number of locations, and they're at the national franchisees meeting, and they're talking about how great you are, and they tell someone else who's not competing with them, they're in a different territory, and they're like, hey, so and so said you're amazing, like, can we get on a call? Now sometimes you may choose to, but my recommendation is having some sort of a pre-qualification questionnaire or survey. It could be just a few questions. It could be more. Mine has 10 or 11 questions right now. The main idea is that you want to get a sense of where are they today and where do they want to go? And ultimately figure out, does it make sense for you to dig further? Sometimes people have totally unreasonable expectations. Sometimes it's clear that they're not going to have budget for the help that they want that you could provide. I would start by creating those questions yourself and using the questions yourself. And then once you fine-tune the right questions for your client base, then start having someone else do it. Whether they are a team member who's doing a range of things, including sales qualification, or you might be outsourcing to an outside firm. We'll talk more about cold calling later, but it sounds like you're getting a lot of inquiries, which is great. The pre-qualification survey makes sense. And what's your reaction on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of this has been hugely impactful. I think, one of the things I was very passionate about from day one is 90% of our clients recoup their investment in us within 90 days.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter if I'm charging them $500 or $10,000 if they know they're going to get that at the end of it. So I think that's made it harder but easier too, is if they come out of the gates and are saying, I can only afford $3,000. If I say, well, we charge $10,000, but you would recoup all of that, then now they magically can. So it's figuring out like what those pre-qualifying questions that doesn't get them to like right off the bat be like, okay, this is completely out of budget, without having that conversation with me live. But absolutely, I think there's a way to formulate it and kind of plant that seed preemptively.
Yes, and my recommendation is that you fine tune that process before you delegate it to someone else, because part of delegation is you want to delegate a functioning process rather than expecting someone who doesn't have your experience level, expecting them to figure it out. Because the reality is, if we think about creating versus running a system, the person who is skilled enough to create a system is usually overqualified to run it. And the person who is running it usually doesn't have the skill set to create it from scratch. So split those apart. One more thing to keep in mind before we move on to a question from Angela is this. You mentioned, you want to help people who have a smaller budget. Two ways to consider approaching that. One, you could create free content or free things, like having, for instance, agency office hours. This is a way for people to get help at no charge. Obviously, it helps me create content and, and things like that. You could do something like that, where if someone maybe isn't ready to hire you, or may never hire you, it's a way for them to get help without expecting free one-on-one advice. So that's one angle to consider. Some sort of free thing. And I started office hours in person as a weekly thing back in 2014. And then with the pandemic, of course, switched online. Because I like giving advice. I like helping people, so that's an option. The other thing to consider is there's something more bite-sized, whether it's a one-off call that people self-book, and it matches to your calendar and things like that, that maybe at a relatively high price point for the conversation, but it's not a big ongoing commitment. That's an option. Like I do bite-sized consulting calls as a way to do that. You also might consider creating some sort of information product. You know, I've got my PM 101 course for maybe people who aren't at the point of hiring me for in-depth consulting around improving their internal processes, but you know, the price point helps them get the training and do it themselves. So I would consider some combo of those, either having a free option and or having something that is bite-sized, either bite-sized one-on-one or that's more of an info product that'll help you keep helping people without forcing you to do really broad, in-depth help for people who can't pay what you're worth. So does that help?
Yeah, very much so.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Hensley, thank you very much. Good luck. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Angela, you are up next if you want to come on video and on mic. Thank you for joining Agency Office Hours today.
Thanks for having me, Carl. I appreciate you taking on my question today. Absolutely.
So I understand you have a question about 4-day work weeks. If you could, please elaborate and then let's answer.
Sure. I'm the COO of Unity Web Agency. We build accessibility friendly and enabled websites. And, you know, we're a small team of several people, but we are also a B Corp. So, you know, we value taking care of our team members and our people. And one of the things that that the leadership has been considering is how can we implement a 4-day work week to basically enable better work-life balance for our team members, you know, without compromising on financial profitability as well as productivity, right? Because when I've looked at different things around 4-day work weeks, you know, we're really talking about scaling down the work week from 40 hours to 32 hours. So even though there's reports that people are more productive still somehow, you know, there is still a certain limited amount of time in every single week
Right.
To get work done. And, you know, that means that our productivity throughput and therefore the amount of revenue we can pull into a certain time frame is going, like, I imagine it would be impacted, but, you know,
Yes.
I'm just curious, you know, what you've seen, if you have any sort of recommendations on how an agency can transition this smoothly and successfully.
Well, first to frame things. So basically the question is, how would a 4-day work week work in an agency environment? A key thing to keep in mind is that most agencies are not doing 4-day work weeks. So it's still a relatively unusual thing. My sense is a lot of the companies that are doing 4-day work weeks are more on the product side. That is, they are not doing billable work, whether you're billing hourly or you're billing on a milestone basis or doing value-based. Like, you know, if you've got a staff of people that are not directly doing billable work, you know, it kind of doesn't matter when exactly they do it or how long they spend on things. So just keep in mind, it is definitely a niche thing. And for anyone who's on live today, if you have tried or you are doing a 4-day work week, please share. So traditionally, a compressed work week has often meant rather than going from, you know, 5 days and 40 hours, instead it's doing 40 hours in 4 days, right? It's like 10 times 4, and then you take Friday off. Or sometimes people might do, you know, some sort of an extended, like 9 hours a day, and then like they take every other Friday off, or, you know, something along those lines. So traditionally, it's been more about how do you cram it into a smaller space, or kind of like some roles in nursing where, you know, you work 3 12-hour shifts or 4 12-hour shifts in, you know, in a week, kind of thing. So, you know, thinking about how might you go about it, and this is true for everyone who's listening, if you currently do time and materials and you're thinking of going from a 5-day, 40-hour work week to, you know, 4 days and 32, if you bill hourly, you are going to see a drop in billables, a drop in revenue. And if you're paying people the same, as, you know, it's hard to cut people's pay without that going poorly. So like, don't do that. your billables would go down. Now, on the other hand, if you work on a milestone basis, you're charging by deliverable, whether projects, retainers, or both, your revenue may not necessarily go down. So I'd say a key thing is if your time and materials, think twice about switching to 4-day work week, because that is guaranteed to impact you financially. Milestone, less so. There's also a question about coverage. Depending on the services you're providing, say, and usually the 4-day is people would take Fridays off. Does something have to get done on Fridays? Is this a case of like the client's website goes down? Does someone need to be on call to deal with that? That's definitely something you want to sort out. Depending on the size of the agency and people's skill sets, is it possible that you are normally a 4-day work week, but someone will be on call every Friday? Maybe you've got like 4 or 5 people who could do the particular on-call thing. Maybe the deal is that, roughly 1 week a month they're on call. I mean, sometimes that means nothing happens. Other times, maybe something does happen. But coverage is an important piece. And of course, some of this also depends on your client base and what are they expecting. Something that some agencies will do, and this is Andrea, thank you for your comment in chat about having, for instance, a meeting-free Friday policy, where it's not the same as a 4-day work week, but from a client-facing perspective, you're telling the clients potentially, we are formally closed, or whether you tell them, formally closed or not, you're just never available for a meeting on a Friday. So that's, potential option. What's your reaction so far, Angela, to what we've covered?
Definitely a number of those are things that I've been noodling on. Our team's revenue is a mix between a recurring revenue stream, we'll just say subscription-ish type based revenue stream, milestone, and time and materials. I would say the vast majority of our revenue comes more from the milestone based type of revenue. And so, I foresee for our team that we need to do more to try to increase our recurring revenue stream. That would help bring that stability in from a financial standpoint. That would enable us to do that, to do the 4-day work week. Yes. The coverage thing is definitely something that we would need to think through a little bit also, because we do provide support for the websites that we host. Yes. And so, there is that, but I mean, if we're thinking of it as like a 3-day work week, I'm sorry, 3-day weekend, right? Yes. It's not that different from, okay, it's a Saturday and a client site has gone down, right? Well, we would still respond in the same way. We would hop on, make sure that's resolved ASAP because that's a site down.
And some of that's expectations management, where you're letting the team know the goal is this, but our clients are relying on us. And when crises happen, we do need to step in. We're doing things to manage crises, for instance, we're not doing site launches on Fridays, kind of thing. But things will come up.
Right. And I think we have really great people on our team. I think that particular expectation is not going to be hard for our team to be on board with, even, if we made this transition. So I think, I'm more just, I guess, like I really appreciate the things that you've been throwing out there as questions, because that's really what I was looking for, was like, what else should we be thinking through, in order to make this a success for the organization? Because I think, we care about our people. We want people to be happy and healthy, both, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So I really appreciate those different questions.
Awesome.
Let's see if I have any. I'm not sure. I can't think of any questions right now. I think, yeah. Do you have any, like, have you actually seen or heard of any other kind of hurdles that clients or agencies should be thinking through?
So thinking about that, one is to consider do you want to rotate the day off? Or for instance, is it that some people, Friday is their day, maybe half the team Friday is their day off, the other half is Monday. I'm not a huge fan of that because ultimately, that makes it harder to have meetings. No, we don't want to, maximize meetings in general. You've probably seen the ribbon, I survived another meeting that could have or should have been an email. There's also a red ribbon to flip it the other way. I survived an email that should have been a meeting. But it makes it harder. So I would lean toward everyone having the same day as the day off, apart from the on-call rotation. I would recommend, by the way, that the leadership team be part of the on-call rotation. I once worked at a company that decided to save money by taking the call center in-house to stop outsourcing it, which meant that everyone would spend at least one half-day shift in the new in-house call center, except for the executive team. That did not go over well. I ended up leaving before that was fully implemented. I actually was kind of excited about it because it would be a chance to talk to our clients again that, in my role had shifted. But anyway, I would recommend that on-call rotate so that it's not falling to like the same person every week or things like that. Just think about fairness on that.
Absolutely.
And the other piece to consider would be what is the impact on meetings in general? Because if you're taking all of the meetings you ever could have internally and or with clients, and instead of potentially doing it over 5 days, collapsing it to 4, if you don't currently have a meeting-free Friday approach, the meeting density is going to go up. So you want to think about what that looks like. I guess my core recommendation before we move on to the next topic about client retention would be whatever you try, get some feedback from the team. Don't present this as this is a final thing and this is exactly what we're doing. I'd recommend framing it as a test or a pilot program. You can always use that as an opportunity to make changes. Maybe you're doing a 1-month pilot program, right? You're not committing to it forever. Obviously, if people have a good experience and then you decide at the end of the pilot program not to continue, that won't go over very well. But I would consider what are the boundaries on how you want to run things, do a pilot, get feedback from people, debrief, right? I have my article on postmortems or debriefs. You're asking 3 simple yet powerful questions. What worked? What didn't work? And what will we do differently next time? So that people feel part of the process rather than it being mandated on them. So let me know how it goes.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate all of that. It's great, great food for thought, and appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. All right. Well, next up, coming up, we have a question from Ian about whether cold calling works in an agency setting, and a question from Patrick about agency growth rates. But first, we have a word from our sponsor. Our episode today is sponsored by HighLevel. Chase from the HighLevel team, their director of education, is joining us, has some tips about client retention. HighLevel, and we heard a bit about it from Hensley earlier, is an all-in-one sales and marketing platform specifically for agencies, where agencies can white label the service and resell it as their own platform for clients. Chase, thank you for making today's episode possible.
Thanks for having me.
So I understand you have some things you'd like to share about client retention. The more you retain your clients, the easier everything else is, right? You don't have to push as hard on your self-marketing. You don't have to push as hard on your own business development, sales efforts, things like that. Your team isn't constantly onboarding new clients. What is your advice about client retention?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the name of the game, right? So before I joined the team at HighLevel, I ran an agency for about 7 years. And we, like most agencies, at times it was a roller coaster. And so I wasn't surprised when about 2 years ago at HighLevel, we did an internal survey. We'd worked with tens of thousands of agencies at this point. And
Yeah.
we were kind of looking to see what's the difference, like what makes a really great agency with low churn rate versus the large majority of agencies that are struggling. And we were just, I mean, it was kind of shocking, the stats that came out of it, but the average agency that we'd interacted with had a churn rate of over 60%. And the more we dug into it, the
they
more
were retaining 40% and they were losing 60%.
Yeah, so essentially, basically, the average agency retains a client for 1 to 3 months. I should say lead generation agency. So agencies that are specializing in ads or SEO. And, you know, it was pretty relatable. And once we started publishing this data, people were putting their hands up like, yeah, that's me. Like, how do I fix this? What's the problem? And so we really dug into that. And what came out of it were two pretty clear things. And so the first one is automating lead to booking. So like myself, our agency, most agencies generate a lead and just sort of send it to the client in an email and sort of stop there, right? That's our job. We generate leads. You guys close the leads. The problem is that businesses have no clue how to close leads. The majority of small businesses are used to people walking in the door pre-qualified, right? They got recommended from a friend or something, or it's a repeat customer. Closing new business off cold leads from online is something that's very new to them. And so you really need to, otherwise you're going to end up in this situation where you're telling them they stink at sales and they're telling you your leads stink.
Right. Basically, everyone's blaming each other, and that's not a good partnership and definitely not retention.
No, and that's what creates the churn roller coaster. Businesses go from one agency to the next thinking that it's this problem with leads and that, you know, this next agency is somehow going to have better leads, when the reality is there's a bigger problem at play. And so what we have found is that the agencies who take that out of a business's hands and use automation, right? We're sending emails, text messages. We're actually trying to connect them on the phone via Call Connect. We're sending voicemails. You know, within the first 5 minutes are the ones that can take a lead, automatically get people to book on a calendar, and that gets you over that initial churn hurdle. And so
I like the angle on automation because, you know, your human team or the client's human team, likely they don't have the capacity to follow up in 5 minutes. Like years ago, I worked with a real estate agent helping with marketing. And, you know, he said, if someone reaches out about a listing, like listing their house, if you don't get back to them within 1 hour, you've lost the listing. So you're on the phone a lot, but 5 minutes, I guess you can automate it. How do you do it so that it doesn't come across as creepy or things like that?
Great question. And before I answer that, I'll say there was a professor at MIT did a study on leads, and long story short, he's the one that said the study showed after 5 minutes, if you haven't gotten engagement out of the lead, it's like 76% likely that you'll never close that lead.
Wow.
And so when you compare that to like it's completely unrealistic that your clients are going to engage every lead within the first 5 minutes.
Right.
So the way that we do it, we actually have a workflow recipe that you can launch that does it in a non-creepy way. Is right away you hit them with an email that spells out everything. Thanks for claiming our offer. The next step is to get you booked. Here's the link. If you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, we send them a text message that's more conversational, right? So, hey, Carl, thanks for claiming that free teeth whitening offer, whatever it may be. The next step is to get you booked for cleaning. Is now a good time to get you booked? Or some other question, so that you're trying to just generate a response, create a conversation.
You're also making it okay for them to say, you know, no, now is not a good time.
Sure.
You know, and great, and then you'll figure it out.
Or teeing up questions like, you know, does this thing hurt, this service that I just claimed an offer for? Or, you know, whatever it may be, it just gives them an opportunity in a very low pressure environment to voice any concerns that they may have. Then we wait 2 minutes. It checks to see have they replied or have they not. If they have replied, we use AI to determine was it a positive or negative response. If it was positive, you can automate back the booking link. And then if they haven't replied in 2 minutes, we go to this call connect, which is amazing. We actually call the client. When they answer, we read a whisper message that you can automate and customize. So like it will pull in dynamic information. So imagine I'm at the desk at the dentist office and it's like, hey, Karl Sakas's agency just generated another free teeth whitening lead. The lead's name is Chase Buckner. Press any key to connect with Chase.
Mm,
If they push a button, we call the lead. If the lead answers, we bridge the call. So
okay.
we're actually trying to put clients on the phone with leads, 3 minutes after the lead was generated.
Wow.
And then we roll into a voicemail drop, a ringless voicemail, and you can continue from there. But the point is, you take that first 5 minutes and you guarantee that every lead in the first 5 minutes is going to get, this series of things, basically the kitchen sink,
Right.
versus what our clients typically do in the first 5 minutes was absolutely nothing.
And so, I mean, thinking about the client retention piece, you're basically making it painless for the end client of the agency. And you're also making things easier for, for their clients or customers too.
100%. And then at the end of the month, the conversation is completely different, right? It's not, oh, I see we sent you 100 leads. What did you do with them? It's, oh, I see we put 50 people on your calendar. How did those appointments go?
Right.
Which is a wildly different place to be. And so that right there will cement clients for months, if not years, if you can take that out of their hands and sort of, when you get it going, clients are like, wow, these guys are the first ones to come along and are, selling us bookings, not leads. This is much different.
And that also creates an opportunity to shift from certainly time and materials or milestone-based pricing to value-based pricing, because
Absolutely.
the system is doing a lot of the work. And any other quick tips? I know you have a special offer for everyone who's listening. Anything else for people to keep in mind about boosting client retention at their agency?
Yeah, the other thing I'll add really quickly is most agencies overlook easy automated wins that software can deliver. So it typically takes a week, 2-3 weeks to get your first campaign off the ground, which clients hate, right? They just cut you a check for $2,500 and they got to sit around for 2 weeks until this first thing gets off the ground. When in the meantime, you can be putting things like web chat widgets on their website. You can be activating Google My Business Chat for them. You can do all these things that will start to generate activity right away that you're taking credit for because you're the one that turned it on. When reality is the traffic was already going to those places. You're just enabling people to essentially text instead of call or fill out a form, which is what people want to do. So there's lots of easy software wins that you can set up that start hitting right away. And if you can kick a relationship off, I'm sure you talk about this a lot. If you can kick it off well from the beginning, you're much likely to retain down the line.
Nice. Well, thank you. And speaking in terms of offering value, I know HighLevel, you mentioned, normally has a 14-day trial for people to check out. But I understand there's a special offer thanks to Sakas and Company.
There is.
Agency offer.
Yeah. If you guys are interested in checking it out, just head over to gohighlevel.com/Sakas, SAKAS. And Karl has a 30-day trial. So he's got an extended trial offer if you guys want to check it out. And if you ever have any questions, just let us know.
Awesome. Chase, thank you so much. And thanks to HighLevel.
Thanks for having me.
Well, next up, we have questions. A question from Ian, and then to wrap things up, a question from Patrick. So Ian, if you want to come on mic, come on camera. Thanks for joining today.
Hey, Karl, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, so just a little background. I own a custom web design, custom web development company. We specialize in helping business-to-business manufacturers and distributors. I've had this agency now for 16 years, started in 2005, incorporated 2006. And ultimately, the question was, why do I need to start, or should I start cold calling? And the reason being was I found that this past summer, the inquiries kind of dried up and it led to a bad fourth quarter. What we are doing well is strong organic SEO. We have a small Google Ads budget. I do pay for premium listings I've tried Clutch, tried Design Rush. I'm in the process of doing automated LinkedIn prospecting. And ultimately, when I look back at some of our best clients, they're usually grossing about 5 million plus a year. On average, probably 25 million. And the owners or the decision makers, they're not on LinkedIn. They're not on Facebook. They barely surf the web. They bring us in just because someone recommended us ultimately. So that's what, again, led to this question.
So ultimately, the question being, does cold calling work? Should agencies do cold calling? My answer ultimately is maybe. For many agencies, it's not going to work, especially, for instance, if an agency is a generalist, right? They do anything for anyone, or they focus on a particular geography rather than a particular client industry. It's hard to break through that way. Unless the agency has a sub 1,000 a month price point, or even like 500 a month, maybe that can work, but definitely some challenges there. Where I do see it work sometimes is when agencies have a very narrow industry positioning. So for instance, with your focus on manufacturing, that is narrow enough that it could succeed, in the sense that you can buy or rent lists of manufacturers, whether nationally or on a state-by-state basis, things like that. It's an addressable market rather than any business with a phone number in a 50-mile radius, that kind of thing. The other thing with that is it makes it possible to outsource potentially to a BDR, business development representative firm, basically a firm that does cold calling on your behalf. And if you're a generalist, you definitely do not want to outsource cold calling, because then everyone's blasting out calls to anyone who knows if they're qualified. If you and the outsourced firm, and you could hire someone directly, sales hiring is hard, and it's even harder to hire someone doing cold calling because it's miserable and you're not going to likely see a lot of turnover. Whereas if you hire a firm, they have multiple people in their pipeline, and there's better coverage overall. But the key thing is that if you and the person making the cold calls is very clear on who is qualified and who is not. So in your example, you mentioned generally they're getting at least 5 million a year in revenue. That way, say you're on a call with someone who's come in through the cold calling program, and they don't have 5 million in revenue. Well, then you can go back to the cold calling firm and be like, well, wait a minute, like they only had 2 million in revenue. We said they need to be at 5 million for them to count, that kind of thing. Have you tried any cold calling previously?
Yes, it was several years ago, well before the pandemic, and I did outsource it to a company. I did not provide them with the prospect list. They generated it. And it was also when we were really just B2B, not B2B manufacturing. So it was a little bit more broad. So yeah, ultimately the results were pitiful. I was really frustrated with the situation. But again, now looking to fill that pipeline. So revisiting it.
The other thing to consider would be, say you might pay an outsourced BDR firm, say something like $4,000 a month. I mean, it could be, well, more than that. If it's a lot less than that, I think there's a question of like, well, what's the quality? If you're paying the firm, $1,000 a month, like I don't know, what kind of training and support do they have for their team, things like that. Because remember, to anyone who's getting that call, they are you, they are your agency, so you want to make sure that they're representing you well. You want to be able to, listen to recordings to make sure you hear what people are putting out there, things like that. It may be worth considering expanding your paid media budget. If, for instance, you were running paid campaigns, pushing people to some sort of a lead magnet, something that is high value, which doesn't work for a generalist agency, but it does work for you with the focus on manufacturing. If it's, what is the thing that every ideal prospect in your manufacturing focus is wondering about, is worried about right now? If you have something that's really juicy, people are going to opt in, even if they came in off of, paid social or other paid type ad. And then you can follow up with them. Obviously making sure you're disclosing things appropriately and so on along the way. In that case, they've gotten something of value rather than just getting a random phone call from a random person where the client's even like, I don't even know who this business is, kind of thing. So I might consider trying the paid media side, pushing people to a relevant lead magnet rather than totally cold outreach by phone. And certainly, don't spam people via email. Thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the last two sites we launched, there were complex integrations with their ERP systems. So NetSuite, which is an Oracle product, and Sage, which is essentially accounting software. We were able to push their online catalogs. And I think what I've been seeing is manufacturers, this huge transition from, just basic marketing sites to now full on e-commerce, or as close to e-commerce as they can get before, pissing off their distributors.
Right.
So
there's always that challenge, right? When you've got channel distribution and direct. So, it sounds like some things to explore. A key piece on the lead magnet would be what is either an evergreen topic that everyone cares about, or what is something that is especially timely. That might be, for instance, you do a research study and say, here's what manufacturers are concerned about today, or, here's what's going on, that kind of thing. So either it's timely and people want to know what's going on, or it's evergreen. So for instance, my newsletter lead magnet is my ebook on dealing with difficult clients. It's don't just make the logo bigger, taking clients from painful to profitable. I've made updates to that over the years, but that has been the same general topic for almost 9 years at this point. It is something that everyone cares about. So think about what does everyone care about, and then try running some testing around that. You may find that you get maybe fewer numbers, but the people are far happier to talk to you.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining today, and let me know how it goes. Good luck as you work through that. All right, our final question today is Patrick. Patrick, if you want to come on camera and on mic, thank you for joining today.
All right, thank you, Karl, and great job as usual.
Thank you.
I wish I could sneak in 2 questions, but I will get it.
So my understanding is your primary question today is around growth rate. Like, what is a typical or a reasonable agency growth rate? If you could, please elaborate a bit, and then we'll answer.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I started my company back in 2012. My company is Balambico, and it's my nickname, Balambi Incorporated, because back then everything web design or digital marketing was taken. And we started off with websites, but just the profitability of websites can be tricky. So later in the middle of the pandemic, we pivoted to digital marketing. And I always, since digital marketing became more popular in 2014,
right.
I just kept trying to figure out what's a good way to give clients a return on investment. And from that time, I just had the idea that if you do everything in the space, right, and the kitchen sink, you'll get a return. So we don't just do it, we literally do everything, and we only onboard clients that can you hear the noise in the background?
I'm hearing a little bit, but I can still hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the challenge of running an agency, right? There's always something going on.
It's just interesting. I'm at a cafe, and I've been there for 45 minutes, and they only now decided to blend.
Oh no. I once was at a conference when it was inside, it was at a hotel, and there's this, it sounded like someone was using like a drill or like a table saw or something, and it was a multi-level marketing company that sells smoothies, and they were using blenders making smoothies in the hotel lobby.
Yeah,
you got them to stop. But yeah, so it sounds like you've focused on websites, you've added digital marketing as a service,
right.
and and there's that question about what might growth look like.
So I'm getting there. So yeah, correct. So in the middle of the pandemic, we took the value-based approach. So we do, we retainer, and we charge them enough that once we bring on team that we can pay, right? So with that said, So between 2019 and now, last year we quadrupled, between triple and quadruple our revenues.
Wow.
Right, because we get clients because we're a proven model right now, so we're excited. We're probably looking to niche. We're debating that, but with that said, so that's the question I have to ask you. What's a realistic growth rate? Well, that's where that question came from.
Got it. That makes sense. So, in terms of what is a realistic growth rate, it can be a wide range. I have some clients who want to grow 10% a year, and I have other clients who want to grow 50%, or they want to double, they want to grow 100% or more. Growth rate varies over time. The bigger you are, the slower the percentage, right? It's easier to double from, say, 1 to 2 million than to double from 6 million to 12 million. But in general, my general benchmark is that if an agency is growing 30% per year or more, I would consider that to be high growth. So if it's roughly below 30%, still fine, but not necessarily high growth. If it's 30% or more, it is high growth. And a way to think about it, because it's all compounding over time, keeps just increasing. For instance, if you're growing 30% a year, over 3 years, it means you're going to double. You'll double every 3 years if you're growing 30% a year. And if you were to keep that up for 10 years, which would be, a challenge to sustain 30% every single year for 10 years, in that case, you would be 13 times the revenue before. The reality, of course, is oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so a quick follow-up would be, should we measure growth based on the number of clients that we onboard, or based on revenue?
Most agencies look at revenue, since that ultimately isn't tied exactly to the number of clients. There's also a challenge when you add, so many or too many clients, it's hard to fulfill the work smoothly for them. As one client put it, their 5,000 a month clients were way more demanding than some of the 50,000 a month clients they were handling now. And for sure, yes, one $50,000 a month retainer client will be more demanding than one 5,000, but that one 50,000 compared to 10 at 5,000, the 50,000 is going to be way easier, in total. So one of the things that you want to think about, and this is true for everyone who's listening, what is your ideal client count? In general, for many agencies, if you're doing retainer-based work, it's between 10 and 20 active clients, not counting clients who might be doing web hosting if you offer that or things like that. Now, I have some clients who have 100, 150, 200, 250 clients. It is possible. One key is that you generally are going to outsource a lot of things, a lot of fulfillment to other firms. You may also use a pod structure where you have like mini agencies within an agency, things like that. So really, that's a separate topic about the ideal number of clients, but I would focus more about growth in revenue, because that doesn't tie you to feeling like you have to grow the client count unless you choose to.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear my other question?
Okay, sure, go ahead. We've got, I think, 4 minutes left. Go ahead.
So a neat strategy that one of the companies that you speak to, that was SharpSpring, they got to have a conversation with them because they took my logo and they sent us some fancy placards. Like, all right, that's pretty neat for marketing, right? What are your thoughts on things like that? Like communicating with them, send them stuff, or even buying them lunch, buying a prospect lunch. What's your thoughts on that?
So, in general, you want to find ways to stand out, but you also want to make sure that you don't overinvest in things. So for instance, if someone has been a newsletter subscriber to your newsletter for several years, it would probably make sense to send them something a bit more involved than if, say, someone just signed up and, or they just reached out, that kind of thing. I do something heading into before some of my sales conversations. I'll send them a copy of my books, the 2015 book, 2016 book, a printed copy of the difficult client book, that kind of thing. If there's enough time to get that out to people beforehand. So in that case, it's not exactly a gift or a treat or a freebie, like say buying lunch, but it's a window into my expertise, that kind of thing. So that's relevant there. I've tried this a couple times over the years, sending like a Starbucks card, unless they're in New England. If they're in New England, they get a Dunkin' Donuts card. But getting that kind of thing is like a year-end, take some time for yourself to plan for the year. Haven't seen a particularly strong response rate to that, and so I've stopped doing that actively. It's still nice, but it didn't really produce like a direct payoff there. So my suggestion would be try testing it. Try a few things, see what the reaction is. If no one responds, then think, well, okay, is it the creative? Is it the offer? Is it the list? That kind of thing. So I'd say it's worth trying. Just don't overinvest in it until you get a sense of whether it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yes.
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for joining today. Appreciate your joining Agency Office Hours. And in fact, thank you to everyone who has joined today. Ultimately, we're here every second Tuesday to help you grow your agency more profitably. The recording will be online within 24 hours. And if you have questions you'd like to ask at a future event, feel free to submit it when you RSVP. My colleague Kate has shared the link in chat for you to sign up. I'm Karl Sakas. Thank you for the time you invested today to help grow your agency more smoothly. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time. Good luck.